Welcome to Nerdist After. Tonight, we're going to break down everything in the first episode of Freeform's new superhero thriller, Marvel's Cloak and Dagger. I'm Hector Navarro, and this is my co-host, Eliza Pearl.
In this edition of Nerdist After, we'll chat about our thoughts on the pilot, answer your burning Twitter questions, and we'll be joined by showrunner and executive producer Joe Pekaski.
Joe is going to shed some light on all of the important details you might have missed, maybe even some Easter eggs. And we're not pulling any punches. We're going to ask him all the hard-hitting questions you'd want us to. Plus, we take a look at the original Marvel comics and how the pages inspired the TV show. It goes without saying, there will be spoilers.
So if you haven't watched the first episode, go right now and watch it. You can catch it on demand on Hulu and on the Freeform app.
Okay, so here's a quick recap. In the pilot, we meet our two main characters, Tandy and Tyrone.
Tyrone is a prep school athlete, Tandy is a petty thief. Tandy tried to pickpocket Tyrone at a party, which led to their powers igniting.
Then they realized that they met as children when they both nearly drowned, but were saved by their strange powers.
Tyrone unknowingly teleported right to the crooked cop who killed his brother, and Tandy used her light dagger to fight off a rich prick. And now that you're all up to speed, let's get to the good stuff. It's time for Nerdist After. Here to join our discussion is editor-in-chief of Nerdist, Rachel Hine.
Ah, thanks for having me.
Hi, Rachel.
I'm
for
so
being
excited,
here.
and I'm going to be stealing this set from my apartment.
Yep.
I like the whole aesthetic.
It's really cool. I like these posters back here.
I know.
And those ballerina shoes.
They're great.
And
Dibs.
the cloak, the hoodie.
Dibs on the ballerina.
Yeah. So guys, okay, so what did you two think of the first episode? Rachel?
I really liked it. I think, people are sometimes saying that we're hitting superhero fatigue. I don't think that that's true, but I also think that telling an origin story in a compelling way can be a little difficult, and this one sucked me right in.
Is part of what sucked you in the tone? Because the tone is so unique for this show. Talk about the tone for a little bit. How does it propel this story forward?
Absolutely. No, I think getting to see teens developing their superpowers, it kind of reminded me of shows that I watched when I was younger that deal with those they give the weight to teenagers that they're feeling in those lives. They're dealing with these different issues, and so it really felt like something that was authentic and had moments of levity and humor, but was really kind of dark. And that's my thing. So.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of dark, how do the themes of light and dark play into the narrative?
I mean, it feels like, as I was watching the first episode, I didn't want to kind of read too much about it and go in blind, and I was really intrigued by the way that their powers seem to kind of play off of each other, so you have this sort of yin and yang relationship between the light and the dark that you can see in the imagery in the show, in the characters, and how they play off of each other.
Absolutely. Eliza, what did you think of the first episode?
I really, really got sucked into this show. There's something about like the mood and the tone that's really kind of like comforting in a way. It just really draws you in. It's like a warm cloak, you might say. And yeah, what you were saying about the yin and yang of the two characters, you definitely feel as one is dealing with something, you kind of see what the other's going through and how they're kind of balancing both sides of the story.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
How are the characters in that balance? How are they similar? How are they different?
Well, they are going through things that are kind of just like one side of the seesaw goes up and the other goes down. So, when Tyrone is going through a tough time in his day, she's also going through a tough time, but in a very inverse way.
Yeah.
And so it's a nice way of seeing like how these two people, when they do come together, are going to kind of like balance each other. What did you think about it, Hector?
I dug it. I really, really loved the pacing, that just getting to know the characters, and really falling for the portrayal and the depiction of Tyrone and Tandy. Because Cloak and Dagger, if you're a fan of the comic books, if you know Marvel and that whole world and how they show up, it's all about the relationship between these two characters. So we've seen superhero worlds before, and I think that the key thing for Cloak and Dagger to work is we have to care about Tyrone and Tandy. And this first episode does such a great job of that, so I really dug it.
Yeah. And also they are teenagers.
Yeah.
And so how are adolescent themes, you talked about this a little bit, Rachel, like adolescent themes are very much highlighted and talked about in terms of, how they're getting their powers. Like, how did that come across to you all?
I love that. I love the idea of when these two teenagers touch, something,
Yeah.
happens.
Oh, totally.
And I was like, okay, very well done. Got it. Yeah.
And you have to, they have such great chemistry immediately in that scene, and it felt kind of realistic, even though you're seeing these kind of fantastical things. But yeah, that immediacy and that click, I thought both of them did a great job of introducing us to these characters right off the bat and really kind of hooking me into it.
I'm rooting for them. I want them to keep interacting. I'm rooting for them. Well, thank you for saying what we're all thinking. Hopefully they get to smooch. Well, obviously, guys, there's a lot to sift through here, and to help us, we're going to have showrunner and executive producer Joe Pokaski do exactly that.
But before we bring him on, one of the best things about the episode were the performances of Aubrey Joseph and Olivia Holt as Tyrone and Tandy. So let's hear from the actors themselves about what it was like portraying these heroes.
She's a lot of things. She's complicated, she's self-destructive, cynical, but also has this like hope that just keeps building up inside of her, and everyone will see that throughout each episode. And she beats to the rhythm of her own drum. She's living in survival mode, and she's just a really, really incredible character that I'm very, very happy I get to portray her.
As he first starts figuring out his powers, it's really it's really on whatever he's feeling or what he's feeling in his heart. So he'll just teleport off of whatever he's feeling. The teleporting, it's crazy because just as Aubrey myself, like, I would want to teleport. Like, I feel like that's one of the most awesome, like, superpowers ever. So the fact that I was blessed to play, Cloak himself is amazing.
You've watched his work on Heroes and Marvel's Daredevil, and now he's the showrunner and executive producer of Marvel's Cloak and Dagger. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Thank you guys for having me. This is very exciting to be here.
Are you a fan of the original comics?
I have been a fan. I don't want to date myself, but I remember flipping through comic books when I was in grade school and seeing Tandy and Tyrone show up in Spectacular Spider-Man, and I remember from the first time I saw that cover, I was like, this is different. I haven't seen people like them, in comics yet.
What was the process of getting this show made, from reading the comics as a young person to getting it on the screen?
It was like a 5-year process. We were just finishing up Heroes, and someone at ABC Family had read a script of mine, and they were like, we need to find something to do, and we ended up developing a Cloak and Dagger script, 4 or 5 years ago, and then things turned over, and I got a call a couple years ago. They found it in a drawer and they read it. It was kind of like the one that got away, so I was very happy to be able to tell the story of Tandy and Tyrone finally.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I love this next question because this is one of my favorite things to talk about. In the art of adaptation, it's such a tricky balance knowing what to leave on the page and what to adapt to the new medium. So what were some of the biggest challenges you guys faced when looking at those original Cloak and Dagger comics and storylines?
I mean, I think part of it was New York was getting pretty crowded with superheroes.
Let's spread the love a little bit. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it just feels like Hell's Kitchen's well protected. I think we're okay. So I think Jeff originally had talked about, like, would you think of relocating? And I was like, yes, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
And we both kind of gravitated to New Orleans. It feels like our most European city. And it feels like a place that, like, we call it in the show, the city that refuses to die. And it's a place that could use a couple heroes. And there was something, within the imagery of the original comic book that suggested, New Orleans was just gothic enough to work for our guys.
And in adapting it for, modern times in a new city, you also deal with a lot of societal issues. So you have drug abuse, we have sexual assault, police brutality. So how have, like, current day events influence your creating of the show?
I think current day events are interesting because I think there have been things, it was important when we're telling the story of our first young female superhero and our first young black superhero to represent the world as they see it and as they have to deal with it. I mean, I grew up with Peter Parker, I grew up with Tony Stark, all these people that look like me, and it was interesting in just assembling a writer's room of people who had that experience and really talking about the real of what they had to deal with. And so it was a good opportunity to take Marvel Television, which, taught me some of my morality, and explore these issues which are, not black and white, no pun intended, and kind of really get into kind of what real teenagers have to deal with every day.
Yeah. Rachel, what was it like for you as a viewer to see some of these things happen in the pilot of what you thought was a regular superhero show?
I really enjoyed that. You can feel the authenticity. You can feel that the writers. I actually looked up the writers' room afterwards to see, because I felt like this is an authentic experience. This feels like something that's, like I said earlier, giving these stories and the things that kids today go through, especially in somewhere like New Orleans, the weight that they actually have. So I fell in love with it immediately because of those kind of combining real life with the superhero. So
There's a lot of go ahead. Joe.
And just not enough can be said about Gina Prince Bythewood, who somehow we got to direct this pilot.
Amazing.
Yeah.
She's so talented. You know, when we started talking about the look and feel, I'm like, I want something gritty and, you know, really intimate, like Beyond the Lights. And they're like, well, who directed that? I'm like, wait, we get to do that? So, I mean, you can just see it up on the screen, just the look and feel, the kind of the reality of it all, you know, on top of the fact that Gina just tells stories that are about things. It worked out really well.
Well, speaking about that adaptation process, there are so many things about the original characters, Tandy and Ty from the comic books, that their origin is, you know, the way that the comic books portray them, but a lot of things about their origins are reversed. A lot of their backstory. Talk about that sort of decision of maybe swapping a little bit of their socioeconomic background between Ty and Tandy.
I mean, I think it was funny. Part of it was, I was watching someone during the primaries of the presidential election, and they were conflating race with socioeconomic status.
Right.
And a lot of people kept making that mistake. And I was like, well, it'd be interesting if for Tyrone we separated those two, at least at the beginning.
Yeah.
And kind of understood that even if you're well off, even if you're going to the best school, you still have to deal with something. If, you know, particularly when the police look at you, they don't check your school ID.
Yeah.
So that kind of started us down the road, and it made Tandy a little more interesting too. Someone who had everything, had it taken away, and then felt like she had some sort of privilege, some sort of need to take it back.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's interesting too in the context of New Orleans, because a lot of people have, you know, been rebuilding still after you know, their natural disaster that happened. So how did New Orleans like affect the development of the show in that context, socioeconomics and race?
I mean, it's funny because there are really interesting lines, and it's almost like a grid of socioeconomics and race, where, you know, a lot of the poor people hang out and a lot of the rich people hang out, and they're a little striated, and then there are racial lines as well. The city is just so interesting because it got beat up. It had Deepwater Horizon, it had Katrina. Even in our first 8 minutes, we kind of dealt with them both and kind of combined them.
Yeah.
But it's a city that, once you get going, is full of such beautiful people who want to save the world, and it just felt like such a great place to work. And shooting New Orleans for New Orleans is not something you get to do, you know, when you film. So it was just nice to be able to be authentic and not shoot Toronto and then like throw in a beignet bar.
I was so excited while watching the show that I'm like, wait, is this taking place? It's in New Orleans. This is great, and that's where you guys got to shoot. Yeah. Speaking of the authenticity of it, here's something that's never authentic: is portraying superpowers, which are not real. How did you guys look at? I know, so far,
Yes.
so far,
Yes.
as far as we know,
Believe.
as far as we know. But how did you look at actually adapting some of the beautiful imagery of Marvel Comics with the way Cloak, you know, exhibits his powers, the way Dagger exhibits hers? What was the process like, looking at that and then turning it into a real tangible thing? I mean, Tandy's using her light dagger at the end of that first episode.
You know what, I think the beauty of it all is, like, cinema is about light and dark. So the idea that we didn't have to like create fake fires or sparks was helpful. And so like the one thing I learned on 4 Years of Heroes is like ambient light is your friend. If you have someone look down at her hand and the glowing reflects on her face, it really works. So you know, Tandy's dagger was, you know, we have an amazing props master, we had an amazing gaffer, we had an amazing special effects coordinator, and the dagger was their baby. The discussions we had about tungsten lights and certain things, and they just created this beautiful thing that would show up on film, and then we'd kind of color it a little. And when you look at Olivia, and her acting obviously helps too, when she's pretending there's a dagger and you see the light reflect on her, it just works. And then with Aubrey, it's the same sort of thing. It's just tying it into emotions as best you can.
Rachel, what do you think of the special effects of the show?
That was probably one of my favorite elements in the middle, when they kind of pull apart, not just because of the way that these two characters are reacting. It felt very real and intimate, but kind of trying to like look, and because it's a little dark and they're in the city, like and I didn't look. I wanted to come in kind of blind and not look at what they were doing. So when the dagger came out, I was like, oh, all right, okay. And I thought that was really, really cool how they showed that, and how, I don't know, I felt like that kind of reaction to what was happening to her felt, again, very, very real, and like something that, you know, I think all young women would like to have just in case.
That would be awesome.
Very convenient.
Really cool. Yeah, I go back and forth between Cloak and Dagger if I had to like magically pick one of their power sets, because they have such cool powers, both of them.
Cool.
You know, sometimes I'm like, well, Cloak can teleport, but then Dagger can just anytime with the those knives, you know?
Yeah, and I love the moment where Cloak actually like kind of is like, you can see him being like, oh, this is kind of cool, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. I love
It's
that
weird,
stuff.
That
but
Aubrey
it's
Joseph
cool.
smile is just
Yeah.
priceless.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, Joe. Feel free to take credit for this. If we're way off,
well,
you
already
can
did.
still great. You can still take credit for it. But my question is, in looking at some of those original Cloak and Dagger comic books, and their earlier appearances in Spectacular Spider-Man, and then after that, they are a little bit brutal. They kill some of the criminals that they're going after, some of the people that they're getting revenge on for their sort of twisted and tragic backstory. Did you look at how they approached vigilantism in those early stories and applied that to how you guys were adapting? Because at the end of this first episode, Tandy may have seriously harmed this guy, maybe killed this guy. She was very justified in doing that. But is that something that you looked at in the sort of gray shades of vigilantism and thought, this is something we can use for our characters?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the important thing. It's I don't want to spoil anything in season 2, but our characters almost do the despicable thing, and I think we want to make sure that like they're like us and human. I make 10 mistakes before I wake up every morning.
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
Tandy and Tyrone, particularly since they're teenagers, are finding themselves. So all in season 1, we have them eventually getting to do the right thing, but
Yeah.
they do a lot of wrong things along the way, and I think that's what makes them a little different.
Yeah. And then just to clarify too, did you mean in episode 2? Because I
Yes,
don't know if
I'm
we just
sorry.
got an exclusive. Season 2, no, it's too early to say. Too early to
I'm
say.
literally looking for the Marvel science right now.
I'm trying to keep you safe.
Take the shot.
You meant episode 2.
I bet, yes.
Right, and so we are going to see that sort of the fallout of these characters' decisions in all of season 1. You're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, and I think we
Very
try
exciting.
to keep it dark, and we try to keep them. There's always a discussion in the writers' room of like, what would we really do in this situation? Because
Yeah.
everyone wants to say, I'd save the day, but
Yeah.
like, no, sometimes what's the selfish and impulsive thing to do?
And when you're a
sometimes
kid.
we do it,
When
right?
you're a kid.
Well, and you have this makes me feel old now that I'm saying this, but you have this, I was talking about it the other day, you have this idea that you're invincible when you're a kid, and
Yeah.
it doesn't really occur to you that you're actually, I mean, logically you do, but you don't always feel that way, and so having superpowers on top of that kind of makes it seem like the world is really yours. You could do anything that you want, even though there are obviously going to be repercussions to that.
And the repercussions are even bigger when you have superpowers.
Yeah. Okay, guys, so we're not the only ones with questions about Marvel's Cloak and Dagger, so we took to Twitter.
And here is tonight's fan question from Twitter. If you can have a cameo in your series, who would you choose and why?
Yeah.
So Joe, who would you want to be your cameo on this series?
Let me just say that my opinions do not reflect Freeform, Marvel,
Disclaimer.
Sony,
Good
or
call,
anybody.
good call.
It's right now, to be 100% honest, it's the original guy they were hanging out with. It's Spider-Man. I
Yeah.
mean, it's even if it was just Peter Parker and he just called himself Peter. I think there was always something very cool about that. Interesting. I wouldn't even call it a love triangle, just kind of almost a comedy triangle when he was trying to figure out what the heck they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think it would be nice. It would be a nice tribute to their roots. When I go to sleep, sometimes I dream of Spider-Man hanging out with me.
It would be great, and these two characters, Cloak and Dagger, are such great characters to brush up against Peter because he comes from a totally different world, and we have such a great version of him played by actor Tom Holland right now in the movies, and he's doing such a
So
great
great.
job. But it would be so great to see again. Cloak and Dagger are other teen heroes, but they have decidedly different backgrounds and tragedies that have befallen them, and tones for their stories. So that's always fun to see Peter mix it up with those two. So that'd be great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fans can tweet their questions about this season of Marvel's Cloak and Dagger to @Nerdist with the hashtag Cloak and Dagger, and we might just use them on the show.
Yeah. All right.
So now let's dig a little deeper into the original comics. The 1983 Cloak and Dagger limited series by Bill Mantlo influenced certain scenes in the pilot and the series as a whole. Let's talk about what Joe and his team did to bring the comics to life.
First up, in the comic and the pilot, Tandy is seen practicing ballet. In the comic version, she's a little bit older, and we see hints at her strained relationship with her mother, which is pretty cool. Look at that.
I like that the ballet came in this way too.
Me
and
too.
It's still like part of her formative years.
And the relationship with the mom is, I think, really fascinating as well. I'm interested to see how those family dynamics play out.
And we got Andrea Roth to play her mom.
Yeah.
So good.
Oh my goodness.
She's phenomenal. She's really
Yeah.
great. The beginning sequence where Tyrone and Tandy nearly drown is inspired from this flashback in issue number 4 of the 1983 miniseries, Cloak and Dagger. We see Tandy and Tyrone as teenagers here, escaping their captors on Ellis Island, as opposed to the version that we get in the show, where they're, again, a little bit younger, and Tandy's about to maybe, pass away, make it to the other side, when Tyrone is apparently using some kind of a power to save both of them, which is pretty awesome. So this is a really, really emotional sequence. It was great.
Oh, yeah. Seeing like kids that little going through a traumatic event together is so heartbreaking.
Yep.
That little girl, Rachel Riles, was in a tank in the car in the water for hours, and she never complained once.
Wow.
Like I looked at that, I'm like, oh, she's going to be a tremendously big star.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What a trooper.
Yeah.
I like the flashbacks too, and how they kind of, the way that they were woven through the first episode, where you get to really get to know them as they are now, and then kind of the traumas that they went through, and kind of fill in the blanks there, which I find really interesting.
We make that realization at about the same time that they do. Wait, you're that kid, right? And then we get to see how the entire scene on the beach sort of plays out after that, which I think was so great.
So in the comic, Tandy's boyfriend is kind of a rich jerk, and in the show, her boyfriend is Liam, who is not rich and not a jerk. He's nice.
He's a poor, nice boy.
Yeah. So Joe, tell us a little bit more about the decision to change the socioeconomic situation of Tandy.
I think I wanted to save the rich jerk for our guy Rick, who she meets at the club. I think when we were kind of switching up the status, it felt like if she came from a rich place, I like that she had just enough information to go, like she said, find rich kids and knock them out and jack them with the rich kid stuff.
I mean, we've all been there. When I was a kid, we knew which neighborhood to go trick-or-treating at. They gave out the full-size candy bars. We all knew exactly. I could name you the street. We all knew to hit that place up. So yeah, we've all been there. So the beginning of the pilot, Tyrone's brother is killed by a mysterious police officer. In the comic books, it's Tyrone's friend Billy who gets killed. In both instances, Tyrone feels guilt for being partly responsible. And I wanted to mention this too. I wanted to bring this up. In the comic books, it's revealed that Tyrone had a stutter before he became Cloak. And this is something that isn't a part of the show. What was the decision behind leaving that on the page?
Well, we talked a little bit about it, and we just wanted to do something like that. We wanted to make sure we could do it 100% justice.
Sure.
And we talked to some people who were kind of media relations people, and we weren't 100% sure we could do it perfectly and really represent what was going on.
Yeah.
So we kind of set it up. We kind of wanted to tie it into the mythology of that oil rig blowing up, which you'll see that a lot in episode 7, and it just felt like we wanted to make Tyrone's life more about kind of a functional OCD instead of a stuttering.
There we go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Works. In the comics, Tyrone is the one who almost pickpockets Tandy, but ends up actually helping her when someone else steals her purse. And in the pilot, it's Tandy as the thief who lifts Tyrone's wallet, ultimately leading them to discover their powers. Yeah, so this plays into that reversal of their socioeconomic status.
Yeah, and also we just wanted to like flip the meet cute a little, make it like meet cute larceny.
Nice.
It's still really cute. When
It's adorable, and then you realize that nothing on our show is that innocent. Stealing his wallet.
It's the most innocent moment of the whole show.
Yes, it is. And it's all a con.
And Joe, we heard that you guys placed some very specific Easter eggs in this episode for fans of the comic. So let's go through some of those Easter eggs. First up, we have the Roxxon sign.
So it was fantastic. First of all, our production designer, Megan Rogers, made us a Roxxon sign.
Cool.
In the middle of New Orleans, which was pretty cool. We try to match the New Orleans style. But it was just fun to use Roxxon. They show up all over both the movies and TV as sort of our nefarious corporation, and we got to do Roxxon Gulf, which is a fun little subsidiary in Louisiana.
Well, speaking of Roxxon, let's take a look at this. Our next one, a Roxxon truck crash. Tell us a little bit about this, if you can. What is the significance of this boom, right there. We spot the logo right before Tandy and her dad go in. Look at that.
So our mythology basically kind of starts, and we explore this later in episode 7, in an explosion of an oil rig that's digging for something that may or may not be oil. So that truck, that oil rig that goes off behind Tyrone, it's all connected, as Jeff Loeb would say.
I hope you guys got a shot
goodness.
of Rachel bouncing up and down,
Like a
excited
child,
on the
yeah.
couch.
That was genuine.
Yeah, you got real excited.
I know. Yeah. Ooh, conspiracy, love it.
Yeah, and part of that conspiracy maybe is the next Easter egg, which is her dad's badge from Roxxon floating in the water after the crash.
Yeah, Nathan Bowen works for research and development at Roxxon, at least back in this flashback before things happen.
It's always R&D. It's always the R&D departments. Bad stuff happens.
They're cooking up
Research
some
is fine.
strange
It's the
stuff.
development.
Read a comic book. It happens all the time.
It's fine.
Research is fine, yeah, but as soon as you start to develop it, then we get sci-fi shenanigans. Joe, is there anything else, any other Easter eggs that we may have missed?
Yeah, we sprinkled a bunch. We Leonard Marchand, our props master, went a little crazy sometimes, and I had to brush him off the plate. But if you check out certain things like names on pill bottles or gravestones, or even some initials on a towel that we featured, there's a few little things that might send people down a crazy rabbit hole.
Whoa.
What?
Cool, we just saw some initials. What's RF?
RF on the
Whose initials
towel.
are those?
Literally looking for the snipers again.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
Oh, my gosh.
If we guess it, can you blink once?
Nope.
I'm going through my Rolodex of
I know,
characters in my
Hector.
brain,
Yeah.
just like,
I can hear the sound
Okay.
effect.
I can hear people watching this on the internet being mad at me that I don't immediately go,
It's
"You
probably
idiot,
very
it's
obvious."
this."
I'm a
They're
little
gonna
sad
tweet
and
you.
disappointed in myself.
Okay, oh man, come on, don't put that pressure on me. Hang on a
Yeah.
second, hang on. Okay, let's see if we can find it. Here we go.
Just that-
Okay, okay, mm-hmm.
Scanning,
Okay, scanning. Wait,
Yeah, I
you know
don't
what? It might be. You know who it might be?
Ooh.
Is it? It might be a. Oh, I think it. Maybe. Do you think that could be it? Is it?
Maybe.
Is it a comic book creator reference? Is it a character?
I'm literally not going to say anything. Right?
It could be literally anybody with the initials R and F. All right, great. Okay.
Without spoiling too much, I think what we wanted to set up in season 1 is, a young man against an entire police station and a young girl against an entire corporation. So we're kind of setting the stage for that.
Wow.
So cool. That just gave me that made me really excited for
Yeah.
the rest of the season.
Absolutely. And then when they team up, oh boy. All right.
You're in trouble.
That's great. Okay, guys, I think we are all in agreement that episode 1 was awesome. Joe, can you give us an idea? Can you expound on the things and the teases you've been giving us so far? What can we expect from the rest of season 1?
The rest of season 1, again, we get to see this story of Tandy, played brilliantly by Olivia, as she kind of fights her way out of cynicism towards hope, thanks to this boy she met.
Yeah.
And this boy kind of fight from being afraid to being brave, thanks to this girl they met. And then as they kind of get their act together, kind of the city demands a little more from them. So, I mean, it's the Tandy and Tyrone show.
Look at
and
Rachel's reaction. She's
That's so exciting. I love the idea of. I feel like there's the young girl trying to save the bad boy, and I just really love the idea of that script being flipped. That's really exciting.
Totally.
Yeah. There's a lot of really great reversals and things that kind of work inversely on this. So yeah, I'm super excited for the rest of the season.
Very excited for you guys to see it. Finally.
Well, guys, and that's it for this edition of Nerdist After. If you'd like to ask Joe questions and be part of the conversation, tweet them to @Nerdist with the hashtag Cloak and Dagger. We might use them on our next show. And follow the show on Twitter @Cloak and Dagger and @Freeform TV.
And make sure to catch new episodes of Marvel's Cloak and Dagger on Freeform Thursdays at 8 p.m. or on the Hulu and the Freeform app.
Yeah, big thanks to Rachel Hine, my co-host Eliza Pearl, and of course Joe Pokaski. Make sure to watch us on, round of applause everybody. Make sure to watch us after each episode on Nerdist.com and Nerdist YouTube and Facebook page. We'll see you on the next episode of Nerdist After, where we'll break down episode 2 of Marvel's Cloak and Dagger. Bye.
Bye.